with more on the tax plan. A congressman from the other side of the aisle, Representative Sander Levin. He is the ranking Democrat on the Ways and Means Committee, and we thank you for joining us this morning. I have a question for you, Congressman, which is this. If I told you that you could lower tax rates and raise revenue, would that be something you could buy into?
Oh, it depends what you mean. We've been through this before with supply-side economics and President Bush, and it led to huge deficits. And I was listening to your interview with Representative Camp, my colleague from Michigan, and he really did not answer the question how we would pay for it. The Tax Policy Center says the 25% rate would cost almost $1 trillion over 10 years. I'm for corporate tax reform, but we need more than a wish list. We need a plan, and we need to answer questions like you posed, and there isn't an answer to that.
I guess, though, the question does become, though, if you actually did believe and could guarantee that we would increase revenues, does a lower rate ultimately, is a lower rate a problem? And by the way, you know, he talked about this idea, he didn't talk about it on the air, but he's talked about this idea of 25%, bringing the top rate down to 25% or across the board. But that would also bring up, for example, the capital gains rate and might change some of the dynamic around some of that quote-unquote 1%, top 1%.
You know, I don't think there's a good answer. Sure, I'm in favor of lowering rates. The corporate tax rate I think we need to work on. We need corporate tax reform, but we have to do it in a way that is responsible, that answers the questions. For example, in terms of his proposal on territorial, it has to be more than a slogan. We have to say, how are we going to avoid tax havens, use of them? How are we going to avoid shifting manufacturing overseas? Are we going to get rid of some of the incentives today that help promote manufacturing in the United States of America? We need to answer those questions and go beyond kind of generalities.
Congressman, the CB issued some new numbers that just came out last night. I know you know about them because you put out a statement that found that the top 1% of households in America, their income grew by 275% between 1979 and 2007. That compares with only an average of 19% during the same period for the average Americans. How much do you blame the tax code on that?
Well, I think it's partly the tax code. I think we have a code today so that the very, very wealthy are not really paying their fair share. And that's why the President has proposed that we remedy it. It's one of the ways we need to approach tax reform. We have to have shared participation, and today we don't have it. Those figures that you quoted show that the very wealthy have done very, very well, while the middle class of America has been standing still for decades. We have to change that. Income disparity is a real problem in the United States of America, as it is, for example, in Great Britain.
It's a real problem, Congressman. I agree with you on that. And I guess one of the things is that when you have an ownership society where a certain proportion owns assets, whether it be a stock market or retirement plans or whatever it is, and then you have a stock market go from 800 to 14,000, then you have a housing, a bull market in housing that lasts 10 years, obviously not anymore. But the 50%, whatever number you want to use, that owns the assets, this is what happens in an ownership society. So I guess then you have to do something with capital gains and dividends, because that's obviously when you own something, that's where you could be taxed. So that's where perhaps you need to do something. But how do you make sure that you don't cut off your nose to spite your face and hurt capital formation or hurt the economy, and then everybody does less well?
You have to be very careful about that. You have to make sure you incentivize innovation. And the tax code, for example, in terms of territorial, if you eliminate some of the provisions that sponsor, that encourage manufacturing in this country, you will be essentially counteracting what you want to do. So the answer is you have to promote innovation, but that doesn't mean that you give the very wealthy most of the income growth in the United States of America. If you look at the last 20 years, about 55% of income growth has gone to the top 1% and 88% to the top 10%, while the middle class has essentially been standing still. That's why you have, in part, the unrest in this country, because a lot of people feel that they haven't been getting their fair share working hard.
We got to run, but Scott had asked Senator Corker a question, and I'm going to ask you the same question. Some people have said that Occupy Wall Street should be renamed Occupy Washington when you think about where the blame lies. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I think we have to be occupied, all of us, in what's been happening in this country. And I think really with Wall Street, I think showing that there needs to be some regulation. It can't run wild as it has in recent years. We need to have sensible programs so that everybody bears responsibility. That hasn't been happening in our country.
Congressman, we're going to have to leave it right there, but thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate
Thank you.
You bet.
And we, Andrew, we have had a lot of meetings of the mind lately.
Yeah, no, we have.